Hello, this is Dr. Nuray Kayakol speaking. The lecture will cover LEGB scope lookup rule in Python. Here is the agenda. There will be 3 sections. At the first section, I will describe LEGB scope lookup rule, but before this, you need to understand what is variable, what is object, and what are namespaces and scopes. After giving these definitions, at section 2, you will be learning different scopes in functions and classes. Let me read the name of the scopes. You will learn what scope is, but now you can guess it at least where the global variables are defined, what we call as global scope, similarly local scope, class scope, and then enclosed scope. You will be learning how the variable values will be modified with the use of global and non-local keywords. In section 2, you will see some examples for the application of LEGB rule for classes, but in the third section, it will be shown in single and multi-level inheritance. Let's start the lecture. So, what is a variable? First of all, you might think that why it is necessary to learn the meaning of variable so that one can understand LEGB scope lookup rule. The broad answer for this question, as you know, everything in Python are object. So you need to understand what is variable, what is object, how they are related to each other. Let's start with an example. X is equal to cat. This is a simple definition of a variable. So on the left-hand side, you see a letter X. On the right-hand side, a string cat. That means you assign a variable name X to the cat. While you are doing this, what Python does at the back, first, a value of string is stored in somewhere in the memory, the variable name, and then points to it. So I want you to give attention or pay attention to certain verbs. Pointing, then assigning, and there will be another one, referencing. So if you get familiar with these words, you will understand at least Python manual or error messages. You will see what I mean. But let's see what is shown on this picture. So this is an analogy so that you can understand the difference between variable and object. I created on my own. So you see a lovely honeybee on the left. So it represents a variable. It goes to a hexagonal cell. It represents honeycomb. Think that honeybee visited several flowers and collected nectar or pollen, then moves to the honeycomb. So this hexagonal cell represents an object. In this shape, what you see, it is divided into 2 parts. On the upper part, you see a value is given, so it stores a value. Remember what was Python was doing at the back scene when you write x is equal to cat. Actually, the cat, string cat, is a value. Then on the lower part, you see a memory address. So you can now guess very familiar. Maybe you are familiar with the definition of variable and object. Object actually holding the value of variable at a certain memory address. So that means if anything having a value and memory address can be called as an object. If this is an object, what is the variable? You might think that variable is just pointing an object. It's not an object itself. Variable or variable name is a symbolic name. Okay. Now you will get familiar with the another definition of a variable. A variable is reference to an object. Please just keep in your mind some words are important to follow certain knowledge about variable and object. The first one was assigning a value to variable. The other one, variable name pointing an object. The other third variable is commonly used is the reference. So here in this picture you see a honeybee on the honeycomb, which is a hexagonal cell. This variable name, like x, has a value like string cat, and it has a memory address. In Python, you can get memory address of a variable using a built-in function id. You will see later on. So in order to understand whether something is object or not, just use id function to get its memory address. Sometimes you can compare the memory address of variables. If they are same, that means they are representing the same object. If not, they are different object. I hope until now you understand what is variable and what is object. Keep these three words: assign, the second one pointing at something, the third one is reference. These three words, they are not keywords, of course, just some English words to describe variable and object, or relationship between variable and object. This is very important. Why? If you look at any basic Python book, you will not see any information about definition of variable. You see only in advanced books. Actually, this is very basic knowledge. If you don't understand what is variable, what is object, you will not understand, for example, the class definition, because when you define a class, you create a variable. If you are not defining a class, what will be the object? So you will further learn more about this one. Let's see. This is another good definition of variable. In order to understand what is variable and object, let's see this example. In the previous page, x was equal to cat, string cat. If we assign x as equal to dog, there will be a new object will be created. This time honeybee will represent or reference to the new object called dog, or pointing object having the value of dog. If this honeybee only goes to this blue hexagonal cell, what happened the previous one? Old object or yellow hexagonal cell, what would happen when x has a new value? It will be in garbage collection. Nothing will be pointing this assignment. So this gonna die. It will be in garbage collection. It is removed. Okay, this is another example. So same picture, actually I just put the name of the string cat inside the object in this blue hexagonal shape, and it has a certain memory address. In order to get this value, as I told you before, you need to use this built-in function ID. If you put inside this string, you will get that value. So let me read once more. Cat is an object stored in the memory. X is an identifier or a name. So variable name x is not an object. Actually, what is an object is memory allocation or memory location having this string. So we learn what is variable, what is object. So what are we going to do with this knowledge? So you see a piece of code here. Only x is typed. There's one variable name on the left. There is nothing defined. There is nothing on the right hand side. This is supposed to be x equal to something. Suppose that you didn't type. If you try to print x, so Python will give you this name error. Name is not defined because you didn't. So it doesn't say object x is not defined, but it gives us as a name error. Previously, what I was told you, this is a variable x. If I go back, this is just a name. You see, make the variable name x point to it. So here in when you type with the missing parts, so you will get name error because this is a variable name. This one is another example. Again, the name error. You define x inside of a function. You call it, and then you want to print. This is again not possible because now it's time to learn LEGB rule. LEGB stands for local, enclosed, global, and built. Until now, you have heard built-in. That is the function already available in Python. It's coming automatically. For example, ID is one of the function defined in Python known as built-in function. That is the B stands for. Here, this is a this x is equal to cat is defined inside of function. Its life is only available in the function, so you can't print here. So it will give you directly name error. So in order to understand this, we should start what is LEGB rule actually. Before this one, so I have to a little bit tell you about what is namespaces and scopes. So maybe you may confuse with the namespace and scope. Actually, both of them shows more or less the similar section of the code, but they are different. Let me read this definition. A namespace is the mapping between names and objects. It's a dictionary of names and objects. What does it mean? We should go back to a definition of object again. You see, it says names and objects. That is the variable name. If we go back, maybe this one. This is, you see, object is the, if you remember, honey bee and honeycomb, that is hexagonal shape representing an object, and there is a name. So when you define several names in the code section, it has to be mapped to objects, whatever you give the value to the object. That's why in Python, this is done in a dictionary, and the name, that is the mapping between names and objects, are called as a namespace. So here we can also understand that what are built-in. So I will not go specifically, of course, all the built-in functions, but you are already familiar. You already use, for example, the print statement so much in your codes, but actually they are built-in functions. So if you type there in the bracket, you see there are double quotes. It's called also dunder. If you type built-in and then double underscore, so it will gives you a lot of built-in functions, and there will be many, but I just copied some of them. So this, why did I tell you this built-in functions before describing LEGB scope lookup rule? Because this is the most wider scope. It's because when you develop a code or type a code, you can use these functions anywhere in the code. This is specifically done by the Python. But as a user, when you define new variables, you can define anywhere in the function, in nested functions, or in class. So there will be several variables name, and then these names belong to some certain sections of the code. This is called scope. This will also, why do we need the rule? Because there will be several variable names defined in different part of the code, so there should be no name collision or confusion. That's why Python should use some lookup rule, so that user is free to define several names, several variables, even same name with different values in different sections of the code, but they have certain rules to be followed. Why? Because during the execution of the statement, Python will look for value of variable where it is defined. Until now, you learned what is variable, what is object, what is the difference between them, and then namespace, that is the name of the variables, and actually a list of is actually a dictionary of names and objects. That's why they can mapped. And then these names will be available at certain part of the code, which is called scope. Some rules will be followed so that all the variables will not collide, or how can I say, there will be no confusion. Sometimes you will make errors and programs will fire some error messages. So you will learn later on. So it is time to learn what is LEGB, scope lookup rule. LEGB, you might guess from the capital letters of local, enclosing, global, and built-in. We have already seen built-in, that is the functions already available in Python. The rest is related to user-defined scope or variables. Now, here is the procedure. You see again some cells, but this time this cells does not represent object, but certain part of the code. The first one has the Python will first look what is defined inside of function or class. That is the local scope. And then if there is a nested function, that means inside of function there will be several functions. So you can define also variables in nested functions. So this section is called enclosed scope. So that is the E stands for enclosed scope. Then global scope is coming, the third one. As you see, from narrow part of the code we go to a wider one, that is the global one. Global scope is the scope is defined outside of function. Actually, the first statements of the programs, there will be several variables. This will be global variables, and then you start creating functions or classes. This will be the third one. And the most wider one is the built-in scope that is already available in the Python. So when you write your code, you define several variables in either functions or classes or some nested functions. Python will look in this order. Now, we finished the first part of the lecture, so I will stop here. Then I will describe second part in the next video. Okay, see you guys.